Our next speaker is going to talk to us about what happens if you actually reimagine all of the things that you're using in your education process and what we do for education. Please welcome to the stage Ian Gilbert.
Thank you. Hi TEDx Dubai. The idea of loads of people coming together from different disciplines, from different parts of the world, sharing ideas, translating ideas. Fantastic idea. But then weren't you doing that in this part of the world over 1,000 years ago? The House of Wisdom. But then that's the side of Baghdad we don't tend to see from in the West. I want to get your brains going. I want to get you thinking. I want to share with you a little question. The question's called a thunk. A thunk is it's the noise the brain makes when it starts thinking about things. Audience participation. I only get 10 minutes, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds of those 10 minutes. Just do this in twos, or can we be a threes if you must, with your newfound friends next to you. This is the question, and this question, there are no rights or wrongs. The answer is either yes, no, or other. And other is perfectly valid. I don't know because is a perfectly valid response. But you wouldn't know that listening to politicians or reading the old media that Leo was talking about. So yes, no, or other. 30 seconds with the person next to you. The question is a broken down car parked? Is a broken down car parked? 30 seconds with the person next to you. Yes, no, or other. Quickly, off you go. Ten seconds. Okay, bring you back. Bring you back, bring you back, bring you back. We'll do some good old-fashioned interactive voting technology. Who thinks a broken down car is parked? Who thinks it's not parked? Who thinks other? Who's going, well, I want more information. What colour is the car? As soon as you say to a child, okay, you think this, tell me why you think it, it's like opening up a little window in their heads. And you see their thinking in action in a way you don't get from the traditional teaching model of I'm going to give you my ideas. I'm going to give you my thoughts. One little lad I was working with was about 5 or 6. I asked him where thoughts came from. And he said, oh, well, God puts them in my ears. And the little people in my head sort them out. And they come out my mouth. Fantastic. Mad. The parking one, I put it to a teacher. I did a lot of work with teachers. Put it to a teacher. She fed back to me. I put it to you. Imagine the scene. You've paid a couple of dirhams or whatever it is for in the meter, and you've gone shopping. And when you come back, you realise you left your lights on, so now the car won't start. Okay? The meter money has expired. The car won't start. You ring the mechanic. They say, we'll be with you in an hour. You've got another hour in that car parking space. Your parking has expired. How many of you, be honest, would pay the extra bit of money for the extra hour while you waited for the mechanic to come out? How many of you no way would? Yeah. How many of you would stand there with the money going like that when people walk by? Thunks. There was a professor of philosophy in America in the 80s called Matthew Lipman who realized his undergraduates could tell you what Socrates thought, couldn't think for themselves. So he put this program together called Philosophy for Children, getting kids from as little as sort of 4 or 5-year-old to really start to think for themselves. Thunks is sort of what I've spun off the back of working in that way. It's a very powerful way of getting kids to think for themselves, because the work that I've been doing for the last 15 years in the UK and in parts of the world as well, and I'm just starting living in Dubai now, trying to bring this work over here, is about, with independent thinking, is about getting kids to think for themselves. But the history of education, you think, well, that's what schools are for. No, it's not. Unless you're a certain sort of child in a certain sort of school. But for the majority of people, education is about getting them not to think. In fact, we don't want people to think. Right? You look at the industrial method, 1911, F.W. Taylor, industrial method. All right? He showed countries Whether we're talking about Britain, America, Russia, wherever, he showed countries how they could be more productive, produce more money, but it involved people not thinking in the factories and in the mines and in the steelworks, because they would mess the system up. So they needed to be taught enough maths and enough English in order to sort of get by, but taught not to think. And you can go back further than that. You can go in all sorts of different directions. Rockefeller, 1906, said at the Education Board in the US, said, "In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands." The education system was about manipulating people's brains in order to get them to love their God, love their leader, go out and fight for their country, do just enough. Right? But the 21st century, things have changed. And the work that we've been doing in schools is trying to get people to think, and it makes their brains hurt. My target when I'm working with a group of kids, I say, at the end of this session, I want your brains to hurt. And we always get that. I was working a while back with a group of, in the UK, we have a system, gifted and talented. I don't know whether you have that where you're from. There's something like, I don't know the exact figures because they're too ridiculous, but it's something like every group of kids, 10% should be gifted and talented. It just seems, but the other ridiculous thing in the UK is everybody has to try and be above average. I don't know how that works either, statistically speaking. Doomed to failure, that's probably why I'm here. Well, I had a group of kids, these G&T kids, gifted and talented. They were about 12, 13, and they were talking about a tree. I said, okay, hang on a minute, what do you mean tree? Let's stop skimming the surface. Let's burrow down a little bit deeper. Socrates, he says, an unexamined life is a life not worth living. Let's get a little bit deeper. 30 seconds in pairs, I want a definition of a tree. These kids couldn't come up with anything that stood any logical sort of test. Oh, it's a big thing with leaves on. All right, so is it not a tree in the winter in the UK? Is it less of a tree in the winter than it is in the summer? This table's made of wood. When did it stop being a tree? Has it stopped being a tree? If I chop a tree down, start writing on it, is it a table? If I climb a tree and start writing in it, is it a table? If I stick leaves on the table, does it become a tree again? And they go, oh, my brain hurts. Huh? One girl, she said, I used to think I was gifted and talented. One of the lads, he said, you despand our brains, sir. I said, what do you mean? You don't expand it, you despand it. He said, I know less on the way out than when I come in. I said, that's great, it's like anti-teaching. But teaching is about them leaving with my thoughts. And there's a place for that. But there's a powerful place for them developing their own thinking. One of my favorite quotes keeps going round and round in my head at the moment. It's an Einstein quote. He says, we can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Right? The problems that the world's facing, and we've touched on some of them today, and you'll have more this afternoon, we're not going to solve these problems. It's the children sitting in classrooms anywhere in the world, hopefully if it's a good enough classroom, whose brains will be opened up enough in order to be able to go out and solve those problems. Right? But we're not going to solve those problems. So if you think of evolution, and perhaps some people watching this podcast might not believe in evolution, but I don't believe in gravity, so you just have to live with it. It's evolution. Darwin didn't use the term evolution. He talked about descent with modification. Descent with modification. If children just think our thoughts, nothing changes. And if nothing changes, basic biology tells us something's going to die. Descent with modification says we need children leaving our schools thinking slightly differently from the way we think to keep going, to keep the world going. So what are we doing to teach kids to think? Independent thinking. My company, that's what we're trying to do, and it can be a bit of a challenge. There are 3 parts to independent thinking, and it's only when I started getting involved with sort of looking at what TED was doing, so you've got technology, entertainment, design, I realized that in many ways independent thinking, it was sort of technology, education, and neuroscience, which is TEN. So I looked at TEN.com, and it's got a website about Bo Derek, so I thought I won't go there. Take the neuroscience. We know so much now about what's going on inside people's heads when they learn, but it doesn't seem to be getting through into the classroom. To give you 3 facts about neuroscience that you may not have known. It takes between 20 and 30 years for a human brain to mature. So when you've got a 10-year-old and you say, grow up, what does that mean? You know, you're acting childish, you're acting adultish. You know, when we say act your age, what we're really saying is act my age. But children are not mini-me's. They're not little versions of us walking around. They are a work in progress. It takes about 25 years for the brain to mature. You can't be old. A direct quote from a colleague in my company who's a consultant pediatric neurologist. You can't be older than your brain. You've got a 12-year-old who has the emotional maturity of a 10-year-old. They're a 10-year-old. Work with them as a 10-year-old to bring them on, as opposed to lumping everybody together by their birthdays. Third one, there's a 2 to 3 year spread in terms of where children are at in that developmental maturation process within the brain, even though they've got the same birthday. But again, this is history of education. We lump children together by their birthdays, why it sort of happened that way. But there's a 2 to 3 year spread. And maybe we do so much damage to children, putting them through the inappropriate system inappropriately, we don't get to 25 intact. Right? And we know that from the neuroscience. How is the neuroscience then impacting on the way that we're designing the education system, the way that we're putting schools together? Education, neuroscience, technology. My latest book is going to be, why do I need a teacher when I've got Google? All right, when I've got the internet. All right? If the teacher's job is just to teach the subject as opposed to the child, knowledge is being democratized. My youngest has access to all the knowledge in the world at her fingertips, standing in a field, updated daily, remotely on a PDA or an iPhone if she wants it. So knowledge is being democratized. Knowledge is out there. What is yet to be democratized, the way I see it, is learning. So if we've got teachers who can teach children how to find the knowledge and how to know good knowledge from bad knowledge, that 1% that Leo was talking about that makes a difference, and what to do with it when they get it, how to be creative with it, how to memorize key elements of it, and how to synthesize and use it, and develop their emotional intelligence and their social intelligence and their creativity and their communication skills, all things computers can't do yet. Powerful role for the 21st century teacher. But drip-feeding stuff from my brain to your brain, there's a different model available to us. And I encourage teachers in the UK to go to TutorVista, tutorvista.com. It's an Indian company established a few years ago for something like equivalent of about $90 a month. I've got 3 children. I've got one at sort of primary level education, one at secondary level education, one at university. They're all in their 20s. I just keep them there for research. I can get for them unlimited access to an academic tutor someone in India with a headset on. It's a Skype call, doesn't cost anything. English speaking, they work on the same virtual bit of paper on the computer. Something like $90 a month, unlimited access, as much time as they would like. Right? TutorVista.com. AQA. In the UK, AQA stands for 2 things. Assessment and Qualifications Alliance. It's an exam board, the old-fashioned model. Right? Why do we have exams? You've all sat exams, why do we have them? Oxford and Cambridge, Industrial Revolution, students, undergraduates used to talk their way into their degrees with the masters watching from the balconies, deciding who were the clever ones. There were so many of them, we'll get them to write their answers down now and do it in silence. That's why we have the written exam. So you've got AQA, exam board. You've also got AQA, any questions answered. For £1, a couple of dollars, I can text a question and within minutes I've got an answer. So you've got the old-fashioned model. You can see how clever you are by how much information you can cram into your brain, regurgitate in an exam and forget it the following day. Or the new model, well, the knowledge is cheap. The knowledge is £1. The knowledge is a couple of dollars. How intelligent you are will be determined by what you do with that knowledge. Right? That sort of technology and other stuff that we've touched on today as well. We've designed in the UK a teacher-free, content-free learning bit of software. Right? One of the reasons we did it was because schools were fed up having supply teachers, substitute teachers. In the UK, and I'll translate it into dollars, even though it just doesn't sound real, $1.27 billion a year is spent on supply teaching, substitute teaching in the UK. Multiply that out across the world, it's just a waste. All right? So we found out using technology as a way of avoiding that. The technology is there. The question is the willingness in the world of education. And then with education. So technology, neuroscience, and then the education part. And Funks is just a simple little bit of getting kids to think for themselves so their brains hurt. One of the questions I put to a group of children was, is there more future or past? And what I find when I ask children questions like that, some of them, the brighter ones, the gifted and talented, the academically able ones, who are good at playing the game of guess what's in the teacher's head, they say, I don't know. And I say, I know you don't know. Nobody knows. Tell me what you think. And they're not able to answer that question. There's a difference between thinking and knowing. One girl, she said, there's more future. I said, how come? She said, well, if you believe in the afterlife, it goes on forever. I said, okay, what about if you don't believe in the afterlife? She said, well, it still goes on forever. I said, so what you're saying is whether you believe in the afterlife or not, still goes on forever, is that right? She went, yes. This lad next to me suddenly says, so what's the point of religion then? I was like, ooh, big question. Front page of New Scientist. A couple of years ago, what is the point of religion? Children are ready and willing and prepared and able to think profoundly and deeply. At the end of one of these sessions, of Thunk sessions with a group of kids, they were 9-year-olds. One lad came up to me afterwards and said, I've just realized how big life is. That's what education can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Whew.